It's Red Eye Radio. Talk about everything from politics to social issues and news of the day. Whether you're up late or you're just starting your day, welcome to the show. From the Uniden America Studios. For Gary McNamara and Eric Harley, Dan Mandis, this is Red Eye Radio.
And the phone number is always 866-90-RED-EYE, 866-907-3339. And Gary and Eric return Sunday night, Monday morning. Always glad to have you along here on Red Eye Radio. I want to start out with this back and forth between, you folks don't know me that well. I fill in on occasion. I host a morning show in Nashville, Tennessee on Super Talk 99.7 WTN. I like to refer to Karine Jean-Pierre as Cringe Jean-Pierre. So in case you hear me go back to Cringe Jean-Pierre, I go back and forth between Karine and Cringe. But the reason I call her Cringe is because, let's face it, she is absolutely cringeworthy, and she's not very good at her job. She's clearly not that good at her job. But see, the problem that she has, the problem that KJP has is twofold. Number one is that she's dealing with a president who is challenged. I mean, let's face it, Joe Biden is challenged in a number of different ways. And number two is for Karine Jean-Pierre, for Cringe, she is challenged as well. She is not someone who is qualified, in my opinion, for her job. And so every single day, she has to deal with people like Peter Doocy and others who ask, it would appear anyway, to be very challenging questions that she seems unable to be able to answer effectively. Like, for example, Joe Biden and his inability to really be able to lead his administration. You've heard about this new book. I was telling you about this last night. The Last Politician Inside Joe Biden's White House and the Struggle for America's Future. And the Atlantic's Franklin Foer, and this is a guy who wrote the book, and he basically is saying that President Biden has been frustrated because he's treated like a baby within the Oval Office. Here's how that conversation went between Peter Doocy and Karine Jean-Pierre.
President Biden is the oldest president in U.S. history. Why does White House staff treat him like a baby?
No one treats the President of the United States, the Commander-in-Chief, like a baby.
So there's this book that says...
That's ridiculous.
When staff
That's a ridiculous claim.
It's interesting because she very arrogantly says, that's a ridiculous claim. One thing I've noticed with Karine Jean-Pierre is that when she gets sort of like breathy, and she gets sanctimonious, it actually means that she doesn't really know the answer to the question, or she doesn't know how to answer a question. And so when Doocy says, why is the president being treated like a baby? There's a number of different reasons why, as an observer of this White House, as an observer of this president, it is so obvious why Joe Biden is treated like a baby. I mean, there was an example, and I'm going to get to the whole thing about what she has to say about all of this, but there was an example just today that I'll get to in further detail. But an example today as to why Joe Biden is treated like a baby. He was at the Medal of Honor ceremony at the White House, and he just leaves in the middle of it. He walks off the stage, wades through the crowd, and out the back door. And people are looking at Biden and saying, where the hell is he? Where's he? And it's like when you have a toddler and you go to, say, for example, the grocery store or maybe a department store, maybe perhaps a mall. You've got to keep track of your toddler. Otherwise, they'll just start wandering about the store. That's what Joe Biden is doing. And he does this often. So either he wanders and you don't know where he's going, or he doesn't know where he's going when he's up on stage, and then it's time for him to say, good night and bye-bye, and God bless our troops and God bless America. He doesn't know which way to go. Or he's trying to shake hands with ghosts. So when Cringe Jean-Pierre says, it's just so ridiculous that Joe Biden, the book asserts that Joe Biden is treated like a baby, I don't really understand why she believes that is such a ridiculous assertion. I mean, it's like a lot of the folks in the media shocked and amazed that Donald Trump could be tied with Joe Biden. And how could this possibly happen? Because, the former president has 91 indictments. How is it possible the Republicans and the American people could be siding with Donald Trump over Joe Biden? Well, it's obvious that the American people are not buying into the narrative that Donald Trump is, by and large, a crook or corrupt or whatever it is. There's a clear disconnect between the leaders of our country, the leaders, so-called, the leaders in our media, and how the American people really do view our politicians and our media and the spokespeople that represent both. On that note,
President Biden is the oldest president in U.S. history. Why does White House staff treat him like a baby?
No one treats the President of the United States, the Commander-in-Chief, like a baby.
So there's this book that says
that's ridiculous.
When staff walked back
claim.
What sounded like a call for regime change in Russia, the president, quote, rather than owning his failure, he fumed to friends about how he was treated like a toddler. Was John Kennedy ever babied like that?
So look, I'll say this. There's going to be always a range of books that are about every administration, as you know, that's going to have a variety of claims. That is not unusual. That happens all the time, and we're not going to litigate those here. That's something that we're not going to speak to. There is one thing that I do want to, because I think I was asked this question last week by one of your colleagues about this particular excerpt that they were referring to, and so I'll say this, we did see the excerpt, the context of the excerpt, and it seemed to be making the opposite overall point about how the value of his experience and wisdom resulted in rallying the free world against authoritarianism, which is important. We have seen this. You all have seen this. And passage of the most historic agenda in recent history in his handling of foreign policy, like rallying the world around Ukraine, as you just heard from our national security advisor, who laid out in really good questions that your colleagues asked about how the president is moving forward, about Ukraine, about kind of leading into these conversations that he's going to be having at the G20.
So it is her assertion that President Biden was leading the free world against authoritarianism. One of the things that I would say is that just because somebody is old, and yes, Joe Biden is old. He is very old. That doesn't always translate to wisdom. And maybe at a time the president had wisdom. I don't believe that the president has wisdom now. I simply don't believe it. And one of the things that I would point out to Karine Jean-Pierre is that the free world isn't necessarily buying into all things Ukraine and all things Ukraine funding. Because this whole thing about Ukraine and Zelensky has turned into simply a black hole of billions and billions and billions of dollars where nobody knows where the money's going. And so, no, I don't believe, and remember those leaked Pentagon papers a while ago, where you had the Pentagon papers that were leaked regarding our relationship and our suspicions of Vladimir Zelensky, the Ukrainian president, and about how we don't necessarily have the utmost confidence in a guy who we are giving billions and billions of dollars to. So that doesn't really seem like a wisdom-infused decision to me. Now, like it or not, President Biden, just going back to the original question, why is President Biden being treated like a baby? That Karine Jean-Pierre says is, oh, so ridiculous. That is a ridiculous assertion. Really? Well, like it or not, President Biden is seen as frail. He does have memory issues. He has issues with his cognitive thinking. Again, he never knows which way to go off of stage. And it is well documented that he throws temper tantrums just like a 5-year-old. DailyMail.com has asked Karine Jean-Pierre about Biden's admission that he feels tired, attributing that to his advanced age, pointing to how he felt morning events were tiring for him and about how the administration did everything they could to not hold events before 10 a.m. And she went on to say that was, again, a ridiculous assumption to make. This guy's book noted that it was striking that he took so few morning meetings or presided over so few public events before 10 a.m. So, I mean, it's very obvious what you need to do. You need to go back and you need to look at how many events Joe Biden has done before 10 a.m. I mean, there hasn't been a lot. Regarding the war in Ukraine, the writer of this book writes that the advantages of having an older president were on display during the situation with Ukraine. You know, part of what I would say is that a president with as much, and I'm going to put this in air quotes, with as much wisdom as Joe Biden, in the lead up to Vladimir Putin going into Ukraine, remember how Joe Biden, he had weak sanctions after weak sanctions after weak sanctions after weak sanctions. So over and over again, it was one wave of weak sanctions after another that did absolutely nothing to dissuade Vladimir Putin from going into Ukraine. And by the way, I will point out and remind you folks, what was it that really emboldened Putin to go into Ukraine? Our failed pullout of Afghanistan. That absolute foreign policy disaster that continues to haunt America to this day, and it continues to haunt Joe Biden to this day. Our failed pullout of Afghanistan was what emboldened Vladimir Putin to go into Ukraine. Because Joe Biden had lost all credibility on the world stage. And then again, the weak sanctions, the constant don't do it, don't do it, don't do it, don't do it, with absolutely no teeth to those sanctions. Vladimir Putin said, you know what, the old guy's not going to do anything. In we go. And of course, we have China constantly saber-rattling as well. And so this notion that Joe Biden, and by the way, I'm not faulting Joe Biden for being old. I'm faulting the Democrats and Joe Biden's handlers and Joe Biden's cabinet and Joe Biden's family for putting him in this position. Because he's got no business, absolutely no business, being in the Oval Office. And so, again, this notion that age equates to wisdom, absolutely not true. One more thing. Karine Jean-Pierre said that the president will be wearing a mask moving forward because, as I told you last night, and you don't no doubt know, that Jill Biden has COVID, and Joe was in close contact with Jill. So now KJP has said that the president will be wearing a mask in accordance with the CDC guidelines. But as Peter Tucci pointed out from Fox News, the president was wearing a mask until he wasn't wearing a mask at this Medal of Honor ceremony there at the White House. And the president came in. He was wearing a mask when he walked in, and then for whatever reason, he decided to take it off.
White House officials tell us he's going to do that after being exposed to the COVID-positive First Lady.
Since the president was with the First Lady yesterday, he will be masking while indoors and around people in alignment with CDC guidance.
But then, no mask in this other video as he was leaving that event. Not sure why he would need one to go in that exact way, but not to leave that little corridor. And officials are not telling us this afternoon yet what the plan is if President Biden winds up testing positive for COVID when he is in India at the end of this week.
Yeah, and not to belabor the point, but during that Medal of Honor ceremony, he was very close to a very old Medal of Honor recipient. And then, again, not to, again, repeat it too many times, but at the end of the ceremony, but before it was over, Biden just wandered out of the room. Just wandered out of the room like a 5-year-old in a department store just decided to start walking away, and that is exactly what he did. And if you look at the video, as Biden walks off the stage and is walking through the crowd and out the door, people are kind of, following him with their heads as he goes from the stage to the back of the room and out the door. And again, he walked in wearing a mask, and Joe Biden, in all of his wisdom, walking out without a mask. And by the way, all of that on the context that Biden believes that masks actually work. 866-90-RED-EYE is the phone number, 866-907-3339.
Did you know that up to half of all major engine failures are due to poor cooling system maintenance? That's a lot of downtime and can cost drivers big. You expect a lot from your engine, which is why the cooling system must be a part of your maintenance routine. Here's a tip to keep your cooling system in shape and your engine running smooth. Make sure the system is properly filled with coolant at every PM interval and during pre- and post-trip inspections. Underfilling the cooling system can cause corrosion and your engine to overheat. Coolant is also used to keep DEF tanks thawed in the winter. If you notice unusually low coolant levels, be sure to have your cooling system inspected by a professional technician. This report is brought to you by Shell Rotella. Shell Rotella, with advanced synthetic technology, is designed to help keep your rig running with more mileage and less maintenance.
Get in touch with Red Eye Radio, toll free at 866-90-RED-EYE.
#866-90-RED-EYE is the phone number, 866-907-3339. Dan Mandis here in for the vacationing Gary and Eric. They return Sunday night, Monday morning. So there is a lot to talk about regarding the president. I know that he's getting a lot of criticism because of the fact that he simply refuses to go to East Palestine, Ohio. Now, it's obvious what's going on. What's going on is this is Trump country. And so because it's Trump country, the president just simply is not going to go. He was asked the other day if he's going to go, and he basically said that he doesn't or hasn't had the occasion to go, which nobody really understood what that meant because the president has spent a lot of time on vacation and going to, it seems like every other country in the world, but he hasn't been able to make it out to East Palestine. This did come up during the White House press briefing.
Just one more. The president said over the long weekend that he hasn't had the occasion to go to East Palestine. I just haven't been able to break. The derailment was on February 3rd. President Biden has not had a break since February 3rd.
The president will go to East Palestine. He promised that he would, and he will. You saw him.
So he was not on a break when he was in Lake Tahoe?
I will say this again. The president is going to go to East Palestine, as he has said that he is committed to do. You saw him just this Saturday visit a rural area, right, that was devastated. Some parts were devastated by Hurricane Idalia, and he was there with the First Lady. They were able to hear directly from the American people, and he was able to talk about what is it that they need. What else do they need from the federal government? So the president is going to go to East Palestine. I don't have a time or date to announce at this time, but he will go.
No, you don't have a time or a date because I don't think the president will go. Now, obviously, he did go to Hawaii, as everyone knows, and he was booed incessantly. Just a disastrous trip for the president going to Hawaii. But he did go to Hawaii. It's very much of a Democrat stronghold. And he did go to Florida for obvious reasons because he wants to win the state of Florida in the next general election. But he's not going to go to East Palestine. So it's almost a moot point at this point because the people of East Palestine, I'm pretty sure they don't want to see him.
Red Eye Radio from the Uniden America Studios. Now, for Gary McNamara and Eric Harley, here is Dan Mandis.
866-90 Red Eye is the phone number, 866-907-3339. So the disintegration of America continues. It's almost every day now. We see these stories of rampant crime going on in once great cities, including this morning. There is a headline from our friends at the New York Post, "Rest in Peace, Beverly Hills." A video, and you see these videos all the time. And it is rather stunning. It is rather stunning that when we see these things that come out, these videos that come out, it's like every few days, if not every day, where you have all of these guys that just rush into these stores. 20, 30 people rush into a Nordstrom's, rush into some of these, very high-end stores, and they just steal a bunch of stuff, and there's nothing that anybody can do about it. You see it at other stores like a Walgreens or Home Depot or Lowe's or whatever it is, where these guys come in. They've got big, large garbage bags and garbage cans, and they fill it up with stuff because they know that nothing's going to happen. And I feel like at this point in America, we all kind of know. We all kind of know what's going on. What's going on is we have these soft-on-crime prosecutors funded by George Soros, advocated for by the Democrats, and they simply want to be soft on crime because of some sick, twisted, thought of equity. They think that somehow it's racist to enforce the laws of our country. And so what's happening now is these great stores, these great brands are now going by the wayside. And in the latest article, this is out of the New York Post. This is out of Beverly Hills, California. You folks listening to KBC in Los Angeles probably know all about this. Beverly Hills becoming a ghost town as high-end retail stores exit the once luxurious Los Angeles city amid a spate of high-end smash-and-grab robberies. And the incredible thing about the smash and grabs is that the people that do these, they're proud of it. These videos, they take their videos of it's almost like a video selfie of these rogue gangs doing this, and then they're posted to TikTok and they're posted to Instagram. And then they make themselves, internet famous, social media famous. Meantime, these communities are decimated and the states are decimated too. But specifically the communities, because then whether, you're talking about right now, we're discussing Beverly Hills, but oftentimes, and we've seen these stories a million times, where you have the Democrats and they're hand-wringing over, this is a food desert. This is a drugstore desert. There's no food stores. There's no drugstores. There's no gas stations in these areas. It must be racism at play. No. It's companies that are saying that they can no longer afford to be in these areas because of all the theft. So you either deal with the crime or you deal with the fact that you're not going to have these stores in your communities. Because let's face it, you can't have both. And we're finding this out in cities like Seattle. We're finding this out in cities like Chicago, various cities in Los Angeles, San Francisco, where you just have these areas that are just deserted because of all the crime. And that's all that they can do. In Beverly Hills, becoming a ghost town, videos posted to TikTok by self-proclaimed nostalgic Angelino. Cody 90210 show off more than a dozen Beverly Hills retailers and restaurants now completely shuttered and not replaced by new businesses, leaving their empty storefronts as a shell of their former glory. I mean, let me ask you a question. Would you have any interest in opening a store in San Francisco? Would you have any interest in opening a store in Los Angeles or, some of these areas that are just racked with crime? Of course not. Why would you? Why would anybody? Some of the businesses include luxury staples like Barney's New York and other once popular brands having filed for bankruptcy in recent years. Other big names now lying empty include former locations for Chanel, Rite Aid, Barnes & Noble, Nike Town, and restaurants like Chipotle and Starbucks. And there's a number of different things that go on, of course, and you know that you've got the crime, the smash and grabs, but then you've also got, the homeless people. They just stink up the place. And so what you have is all of these various sociological and criminal issues that are going on in these Democrat-run cities. Nobody wants to handle the problem. Everybody wants to just scream, oh, it's racism, and oh, you're anti-homeless person or whatever the heck it is. And, bottom line is, okay, so if you don't want to handle the problems, then you're going to have a bigger problem on your hand, which is streets and cities that are decaying right before our very eyes. And you see it all the time. And it's hard to feel sorry for these cities. I used to live in Los Angeles. I know, because I'm from there, I know exactly where this is. And it's a gorgeous, used to be anyway, a gorgeous part of Los Angeles, Beverly Hills. So now we have all of these issues that are going on. Nobody wants to deal with it. Now L.A., apparently the L.A. Police Department has, and L.A. has a new task force that is dealing with the smash and grabs. The new task force is composed of the L.A. Police Department, the L.A. County Sheriff's Department, along with the U.S. Marshals Apprehension Task Force and the FBI Apprehension Task Force. So now what they're doing is they've got 22 full-time investigators, and they were formed on the same day a Los Angeles Macy's was raided by a group of masked thieves in hooded sweatshirts. Yet, if you have, this is always so great, yet if you have, some of these businesses that say, nobody is allowed into our store if they're wearing a hooded sweatshirt. Well, that is somehow, and by the way, in August, in June, July, and August, you have a bunch of guys walking into your store and they've got hooded sweatshirts in what can only be a social media fueled flash mob burglary. And so the guys inside the store, the people inside the store say, no. You can't come in here with those hoodies. We know what you're up to. Oh, that's racist. No, it's not racist. It's actually reacting to what people have been experiencing and has been posted on social media. And why exactly is it that you're wearing a hooded sweatshirt in the middle of August? I mean, it is silly. And the frustrating thing about all of this is that there really is there's no consequences. There's no ramifications. There's no arrests. We see this all the time. And so then you wonder why people feel despondent about all of these things. In San Francisco, you see, and I know that it's very easy to pick on San Francisco. Somebody sent me a note one time, said, why are you always picking on San Francisco? I said, the reason why I pick on San Francisco so much is because it's easy. They make it easy. San Francisco continues to see a mass exodus. Now the Nordstrom's has closed or is closing. Another store in San Francisco called Gump's, which is a high-end department store, very famous, is also getting ready to bail. And so now you've got the guy who owns Gump's, and he is telling the leader of the state of, the governor of California and San Francisco Mayor London Breed, that he simply cannot afford to operate in the city of San Francisco, where he says crime continues to skyrocket. Again, this is the guy who is the owner of this Gump's, and he says, this city of San Francisco is not getting better anytime soon under the Democrat rule. Here's part of what he had to say.
San Francisco has focused on what I call a minority of people who are making it an almost unlivable and unworkable environment with human waste and debris. And that's not a sustainable thing. Our door counts are down, I don't know, probably 30%.
Yeah, 30%. And so when you have this mass exodus of people and a mass exodus of downtown, there's no real reason why people would go into your store. And again, I'm playing audio from this, the owner of a store called Gump's, a high-end department store. And just like Nordstrom, just like a slew of other businesses, looks like they're going to be exiting San Francisco. And he says part of the problem, of course, is that you have the federal agencies there in San Francisco that they've decided to continue their work-from-home policies because of COVID, and that's not helping matters any.
We have 25 million square feet of empty office space. Government buildings are the worst. So federal office buildings and state office buildings are at 30% occupancy because for some strange reason, even though the pandemic ended months and months ago, they're still being directed to work at home.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So what can you do when you have so many people that are bailing a city? And here's the deal, is that he has actually reached out to the mayor of San Francisco, London Breed, and the governor of California, Gavin Newsom, and they have no response. They have no response. Nobody has anything to say about any of this. Just across the bridge in Oakland, by the way, you still have this woke DA there that residents are trying to recall. Her name is Pamela Price, and she had a town hall, I think this was a week before last, as people were complaining about what's going on there. And you've got all of these people who show up, and they're all complaining about the same thing, crime. And this guy, who is a local business owner, he's angry because his business has been robbed a number of different times, and nobody's facing any charges.
Compassion, that don't work with criminals.
He wants the DA to hold criminals accountable, which he says Price has so far failed to do.
Her talents will be better in the public defender. I mean, why do you run for a job to prosecute people and you don't want to do that job? I mean, that's kind of oxymoron.
Well, listen, here's the deal, is that I would say to the people of San Francisco, I would say to the people of Oakland, I would say to the people of, Chicago and all of these other places that are just overrun with crime, you hired these people. I love this story out of Oakland where after this DA, Pamela Price, they're trying to recall her. She's only been in office for, I don't even think it's been a year yet. And she ran on, this twisted form of, this twisted notion of equity and, bail reform and justice reform and all of these things that are, essentially soft on crime policies. And so when you hire those people in, when you vote for those people, then what happens? They do what you hired them to do. So people in Oakland and people in San Francisco, people in California, you can't sit here and complain when the people that you voted for are doing what they said that they were going to do. Here's the very latest on this kind of story. Walmart shutting down the self-checkout options, and the reason, of course, is not surprising. It is because of theft. This is from CNBC. And part of what they say is, yes, they are shutting down the self-checkout because people are basically taking their stuff. They'll pay for one or two items, but then they bag the other 15, and they won't pay for it. And so now Walmart is having to change what they're doing because of theft. Walmart has reported $5 billion in theft since 2021. $5 billion. In order to combat the issue, Walmart is not only closing self-checkout counters around the world, but it is also installing additional security measures. And it's only a matter of time before Walmart begins to shut down stores in some of these more crime-ridden areas. And again, it's hard to feel sorry for the people who end up with food deserts and drugstore deserts because they are the ones that are hiring in, voting for these soft-on-crime DAs funded by George Soros. 866-90-RED-EYE, 866-907-3339. Dan Mandis here, and this is Red Eye Radio.
Lines open for your calls. 866-90-RED-EYE on Red Eye Radio.
Eight 866-90-RED-EYE is the phone number, 866-907-3339. Coming up, all the latest on the clearly upcoming impeachment inquiry. Details straight ahead on Red Eye Radio.
This is Red Eye Radio on Westwood One. Now, it's Red Eye Radio. Talk about everything from politics to social issues and news of the day. Whether you're up late or you're just starting your day, welcome to the show. From the Uniden America Studios. For Gary McNamara and Eric Harley, Dan Mandis, this is Red Eye Radio.
866-90-RED-EYE. It is looking really positive in the sense that Joe Biden will be undergoing an impeachment inquiry. So you've got James Comer, you've got Jim Jordan, and they are doing everything they can to investigate this administration, investigate Hunter Biden. How does the Hunter Biden hijinks and shenanigans, how does that impact Joe Biden? Was Joe Biden involved in the influence peddling and the bribery scheme through Burisma? There's so many different questions. And the problem that Comer and Jordan are having is that they are being blocked at every turn. And so I know that you know this, but the impeachment inquiry is different from actual impeachment hearings. This is basically giving the members of Congress, the Republican Party, these various committees, is giving them really just a lot more power to investigate. And so once they get all of the information through the impeachment inquiry, then they can make the decision as to whether or not they actually move to impeach the president in the House. I don't believe that I believe that it will get through the House. I don't believe that it'll get through the Senate. But all that being said, there might be a possibility, if you look at the makeup of the Senate, there might be a possibility, if they want this president out, that the Republicans in the House and the Judiciary Committees might be able to put together such an incredibly airtight case that they can make the argument, and a good argument, that the president should be impeached and removed from office after the folks in the Senate hear the evidence. And it may give the Democrats an opportunity in the Senate to say, look, Joe Biden is too old, and he's not making a lot of sense these days. He does have serious cognitive issues. This is a way for us to get rid of him. Or what they could do is they could go to the president, because I don't believe that people within the Democrat Party actually want Joe Biden to run. And so they may go to Joe and they may go to him and say, you know what? This evidence that Comer and Jim Jordan and others have been able to bring up, it is very compelling. And so if, Joe, you don't step down to spend more time with your family, then we will entertain the conversation regarding impeachment. And that is a very real possibility. And every single day, there is more evidence of the Biden's wrongdoing. Today is a perfect example. This is from the Federalist. They've got quite the blockbuster headline that you won't hear in a lot of places, that the FBI spoon-fed false information to DOJ Special Prosecutor David Weiss so that he would be thrown off the trail of evidence of Biden corruption. The reason was to protect Hunter Biden and Joe Biden. So we all know the 1023 and how that was rife with information. Well, the FBI and the DOJ, they didn't want the 1023 to gain any traction. So what they did was they tried to discredit the material from the 1023 by saying that it was actually discredited material from Rudy Giuliani. Because everybody, on the left believes that Rudy Giuliani is, has no credibility left, and he's basically a Trump sycophant and a nut job. That's what the left believes of Rudy Giuliani. And so for the FBI, they could say, oh, yeah, this information, it came from Rudy Giuliani. So you don't really need to pay much attention to it because more than likely this discredited information, since it came from a discredited source, Rudy Giuliani, there's no real reason to pay attention to it. You see where they're going, and they worked with the New York Times to get this discredited information, put that in air quotes, this discredited information out there. Emails, again, this is from the Federalist, emails obtained by the Heritage Foundation following a Freedom of Information Act lawsuit and shared exclusively with the Federalist revealed that lies leaked to the New York Times about the origins of damning evidence implicating Hunter and Joe Biden in a bribery scandal were fed to Delaware U.S. Attorney David Weiss. Margot Cleveland wrote this story for the Federalist, and she says, quote, the New York Times reported those lies in its December 11th, 2020 article. Material from Giuliani, again, that's important, material from Giuliani spurred a separate Justice Department pursuit of Hunter Biden. Just a week after Americans first learned of the investigation of the now president's son, the Times reporting was, they say, replete with falsehoods and deceptive narratives, but Americans just didn't know it at the time. So again, what they're trying to do is protect ultimately Joe by talking about how all of this material was gleaned from the discredited Rudy Giuliani as opposed to this 1023. And the FBI was doing this, the DOJ was doing this to protect Hunter and Joe. Well, it turns out that material did not come from Rudy Giuliani. It came from a confidential human FBI source. The FBI said it was from Giuliani, probably to send Weiss into a different direction and also to, again, try and discredit the intelligence because Giuliani is not considered a reliable source these days. So now the FOIA-produced emails reveal even more. The FBI's lies, they laundered through the New York Times, were fed directly to Delaware U.S. Attorney David Weiss. You see how this is going. You see what they're trying to do. They're using the media to, as they say in the in article and on social media, they're using the media to launder these lies through the New York Times to the American people and to Delaware U.S. Attorney David Weiss, because they don't want the American people to understand the just mountain of information against Hunter Biden and Joe Biden. They don't want they don't want the American people to believe that this is credible information. It is credible information. They found emails from the FBI's National Press Office where they had forwarded this Times article to David Weiss and his team, which spun evidence obtained by the FBI's field office is actually originating as Giuliani disinformation. I'm going to repeat that because it is important. They found emails from the FBI's National Press Office where they had forwarded this Times article to David Weiss and his team that spun evidence obtained by the FBI's field office is actually originating as Giuliani disinformation. Why would they do that? Because they wouldn't want Weiss to look closely at this 1023 information. by saying that it was Rudy Giuliani intel, put that in air quotes, well, then they wouldn't pay much attention to it because it is discredited information. Some of that intelligence, by the way, that Hunter Biden served on the board of Burisma to protect Burisma through his dad. That Burisma was coerced by the Bidens to pay bribes of $5 million to each Biden, Joe and Hunter, to get that investigation stopped. That there were 17 audio recordings of the Bidens discussing all of this, but they never paid Joe directly, and that Joe Biden was the big guy. Now, this is all information that was gleaned from a confidential and credible human source from the FBI or for the FBI. But they didn't want Weiss to pay attention to all of this, and so they said that this was a Giuliani discredited info. James Comer from House Oversight was going back and forth with IRS whistleblower Gary Shapley about that now infamous 1023 and about how the FBI clearly did not want anyone to pay attention to this 1023. Here's part of that conversation.
Were you all ever given access to the Form 1023 that alleged Joe Biden and Hunter Biden were a part of a bribery scheme with Ukraine? The reason I ask that is because that allegation is consistent. The way that the oligarch claimed he gave the Bidens the bribe is consistent with what we've seen in Romania and other countries where they set up all these shell companies and then they launder the money through the shell companies back down to different Biden family members. So I wondered if you knew about that form before it became public.
So I can speak to that. So in my original transcript, I wouldn't have been able to say that I knew anything about 1023, but I provided a supplement after I saw open source information from the former Attorney General Bill Barr that said that he saw this document and they sent it to Delaware for further investigation. And the team, as far to the best of my knowledge, never saw that document.
So the 1023 that the FBI was trying to discredit and hide never made it to the IRS, who is investigating Hunter Biden. Why would they try and hide that form that supposedly has all of this incriminating information on the Bidens? Because they were trying to protect the Bidens. See, all of these stories go back to two things. Number one is the clear influence peddling, corruption, and bribery that Hunter and Joe Biden were engaged in, and the fact that the FBI and the DOJ, they were trying to protect the president and his son. Because remember, when they're trying to protect Hunter Biden, it's because they were getting very close to Joe Biden, because he is, of course, intricately and intimately involved. Joseph Ziegler, by the way, was that second IRS whistleblower, and he was talking about this very thing, that the FBI and the DOJ, they were trying to discredit this 1023. They were also, by the way, also not providing this information to the very people that were investigating Hunter Biden from the IRS.
So the team that was in charge of investigating the Biden family for tax crimes never received the FBI document that alleged Joe Biden was involved in a bribery scheme.
Yeah, for the IRS investigators on the case, the answer is no.
Is that odd? I mean, everybody knew you were investigating the Bidens for at least tax evasion.
Generally speaking, if there's any types of money coming in and there's a criminal tax investigation ongoing, I don't see how that information could be withheld from the investigators.
And I can tell you, and I can provide this in my testimony, but like there's things that are contained on that document that could further corroborate other information that we might be having an issue corroborating because it could be regarding a foreign official. Wow. So if we have information regarding that in a document or a witness, we can further corroborate later evidence. And like I said, if that's something that we have, we can turn that over to the House Ways and Means Committee.
Thank you.
So the big question now is what is going to happen with this impeachment inquiry? You had James Comer and Jim Jordan. They were both on Sean Hannity's show last night. I've got a little bit of that audio for you, but they're both incredibly confident that not only will they have a full vote in the House of Representatives regarding the impeachment inquiry, they also believe that the impeachment inquiry vote will pass and they will begin that process. Again, what this does is this gives them a lot more power to investigate the Bidens. So we'll have to see where that ultimately goes. I do have some of that audio straight ahead here on Red Eye Radio. The phone number is 866-90-RED-EYE, 866-907-3339.
Surviving and thriving as an owner-operator has just as much to do with managing costs as it does with generating revenue. Understanding basic principles of operating costs can save you thousands of dollars a year. Costs are not the same each month. If 9,600 miles are driven one month and 10,000 miles the next, two different sets of costs apply for each month. For example, if your tractor payment is $1,850 per month and you drive 9,600 miles in the month, your tractor payment is costing you 19.3 cents per mile. Drive 10,000 miles, though, and that same payment will cost you 18.5 cents per mile. This is one of your major fixed costs while paying off a truck loan. The difference in this example is only a fraction of a cent, which may seem like small change, but it ultimately amounts to $960 more annually on the bottom line. Because though fixed costs do not go down over time, you can reduce your cost per mile with more paid miles. Owner-Operator Business 101 is provided by Shell Rotella with advanced synthetic technology. For more information, go to overdriveonline.com to the Overdrive's Partners in Business section of the website for more detail on Business 101 and many other topics.
Get in touch with Red Eye Radio, toll free at 866-90-RED-EYE.
Red Eye Radio, 866-90-NATION is, 866-90-RED-EYE, 866-907-3339 is the phone number. And there's a lot going on as it relates to the impeachment inquiry. And so that's going to be the big question heading into the next congressional session. What is or what will the Republicans be able to do? They want answers to a lot of this. And so there was another development earlier today, an exclusive from Fox News Digital. House Oversight Committee Chairman James Comer subpoenaed Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas and a whole bunch of several DHS and Secret Service officials for documents and testimony related to the Secret Service's alleged tip-off of the Biden transition team regarding a planned Hunter Biden tax probe interview back in 2020, and also accusing the agencies of obstructing a congressional investigation. So, yeah, they want answers as to why it seems that they tipped off Biden's transition team about this upcoming Hunter interview, which, by the way, never happened. Comer told Sean Hannity last night, yeah, this is pretty much par for the course.
We have instance after instance throughout this whole investigation to where we've uncovered more information about where the IRS investigation into Hunter Biden, which, as we've heard from the IRS whistleblowers, was leading directly to Joe Biden, was obstructed. And I can tell you from my experience over the past 9 months leading this investigation of Biden's all the influence peddling schemes, that we've been obstructed at every turn, not only by the Biden attorneys, but also by the Department of Justice, by Homeland Security now. We've been obstructed by the media.
And see, that is why, and they'll tell you this, of course, they have been saying this for a long time, that is why the impeachment inquiry is so important. The reason the impeachment inquiry is so important is because they need these powers. They need these powers to be able to get the information that they need to ultimately decide whether or not they will move to impeach the president. This is Jim Jordan.
That's the same guy that Merrick Garland made the special counsel. So, of course, the fix is in.
Jim Jordan's talking about, of course, David Weiss and the new special counsel for the Department of Justice.
The White House is getting all ready because they know what's likely to happen later this month. The Speaker's been clear about this. If we need to go to an impeachment inquiry phase of our oversight work, we will do that. They're getting ready, but we're going to come at this from all angles. Mr. Comer today subpoenaed documents and individuals from DHS and the Secret Service. Chairman Smith has subpoenaed individuals from the IRS who were part of the investigation into Hunter Biden. We have subpoenaed individuals from the FBI who were part of the investigation. We want them in for depositions. So we're coming at this from three sides to get the facts for the country so we know whether we need to go to impeachment inquiry. But it is looking like more and more every day we need to go to that phase of our oversight work.
Well, and here's the thing, as we continue to go along this merry road of Hunter Biden and Joe Biden and Burisma and bribery and corruption and influence peddling, is that there's a lot of people that are out there and they'll say, oh, there's no evidence, which, I mean, people who listen to me in Nashville know this is a big irritation of mine.
Red Eye Radio from the Uniden America Studios. Now, for Gary McNamara and Eric Harley, here is Dan Mandis.
Appreciate you being here. The phone number remains 866-90-RED-EYE, 866-907-3339. You know, I was talking earlier about what is going on in a lot of these bigger cities run by Democrats. I feel like it's, at this point, one of those topics we know. But you know what else we know? We know that millennials and Gen Z, they are among the largest share of residents that are leaving the city of San Francisco. You know, I do wonder, if you got a job in San Francisco, would you actually go? I mean, there's been instances where, you know, I'm in Nashville, Tennessee, and I've lived and I've worked all over the country. I was born and raised in Los Angeles. I've had stops in Colorado Springs. I've had stops in Denver, Richmond, Virginia, Fort Wayne, Indiana, Dallas, Texas. I mean, I could go on and on. I've been here in Nashville for about 10 years now, where I host a morning show on Super Talk 99.7 WTN. You can check it out, morning 6 to 10 Eastern time. But, you know, that there's so many great places to live across America. I know that it sometimes seems like we're divided between, you know, really it's two different cultures, isn't it? You know, you've got the big city culture, which really seems to be defined by crime and bad schools and smash and grab robberies and all that kind of stuff, and, you know, very woke ideologies and that kind of thing. That's what is indicative of the bigger cities. But then you've got some of the other cities that you know, maybe are more conservative, like for example, Nashville proper and Memphis, of course, here in Tennessee, both run by Democrats, but they're surrounded by conservatism. And so you have a lot of these states, and this is what I love about how you'll have some of these Democrats who will say, oh, well, for example, one of the knocks on Tennessee, some people will say, well, Tennessee, you know, you've got all that crime in Tennessee. And Democrats will say that like it's a gotcha moment, like, oh, look at this Republican state led by Republicans. There's so much crime in Tennessee. Oh, look, the murder rate is up. And then you point out, yeah, but there's one flaw in your desperate attempt of an argument. And that is that the crime that is going on, while, yes, it is in the state of Tennessee, it is actually in the Democrat-run cities of Nashville and Memphis. It's like a big old middle finger right back at those people that are, you know, trying to say that these, you know, Republican states are full of, you know, murder. Which, you know, I mean, I guess you could say that technically they're right, because here in Tennessee, you've got Memphis and Nashville that are in our state. But at the same time, what are the reasons why? And it's always the same reasons. And that's why, it is really sad when you meet people. I had, this was actually really an awkward moment for me. And it's like when you're a talk show host, you can't escape the news. You can't escape all of the stuff that I talk about every single day, either on my morning show or, with you folks on Red Eye or filling in across the country. This stuff just, seeps into my everyday conversation because I'm not bragging, but I'm well read because I have to be. So I go to IHOP every Sunday morning. My wife and her family, we all go to IHOP, and it's just a Sunday morning ritual. And so a few months ago, one of the waitresses who waits on us, pretty consistently said that it was her last day and she was going to move. And so I'm trying to, not be awkward, and I'm trying to participate in the conversation. And it turns out I probably shouldn't have. I said, really? So where are you moving to? And she said, oh, I'm moving to Oregon. And I said, oh, okay, great. You're moving to Oregon. Well, just whatever you do, don't go to Portland. And so I could see the joy leaves this woman's face, this IHOP waitress. And she said, well, why shouldn't I go to Portland? And I start monologuing about the crime, the woke, and all the problems that Oregon has, and just, all of the things that we talk about in talk radio every single day about these Democrat-run cities. And Portland is certainly one of them that is facing a massive amount of challenges, from crime to homelessness, et cetera. It's like if somebody told you, as you listen to Red Eye Radio and you listen to talk radio, it's like if somebody told you they were moving to San Francisco. What's the first thing that you think of? The crime, the feces in the street, the drugs, and the Democrats. That's what you think of. Well, when this woman said to our table that she was moving to Portland, I couldn't help myself. I tried to stop. My wife was actually kicking me in the shin, telling me to shut up. Like only wives can do with their feet, kicking your shin. And I tried to stop, and I talked myself into a corner where at the end of this, 90-second diatribe about this poor waitress's new home of Portland, Oregon, I managed then to say, but you know what? The trees are really nice. And there's a lot of hiking trails, as I desperately tried to figure out a way out of this monologue that I had started to go down the path of. But you see, it is true. Here and I don't know, where you live, obviously, this is sadly kind of a one-way conversation sometimes. But in your state, no doubt, if you live in, Illinois, that Chicago's a crap hole, particularly the south side of Chicago. The places to go and the places not to go. If you live in New York, it's the same thing. Here in Tennessee, it's Memphis. Memphis is like the joke of Tennessee. And so when you see these cities and you see the Democrats and, they try and portray these cities of, as sort of, these shining beacons of whatever, it's like they're really not. They used to be, but they're not any longer. And so when you see the headline from the New York Post, millennials and Gen Z among the largest share of residents leaving San Francisco, that tells you that, some of these middle-agers, they're realizing, and some of the younger, folks as well, they're realizing that there are things that you can do in life to put yourself in a position to succeed. And living in places like San Francisco, that does not, at least in my opinion, put you in a place to succeed. It simply doesn't. Now, for the last couple of weeks, I was sort of, shame spiraling over this conversation that I had with this waitress where I again went on this diatribe, this monologue about how much, Portland sucks. And, my a buddy of mine who actually is a liberal said, you were trying to help her in your own really awkward way, because what you were trying to tell her was, maybe you might want to try to find a place in the suburbs. Okay, maybe he was trying to make me feel better. But you ever get to that point in your personal relationships where you allow all of the things that you know and all of the things that you see and the things that you read and watch, and you start just bloviating to people that you know, or maybe your family who may not necessarily want to hear your little diatribe. And part of my part of the conversation on this, I think, has to be, well, that all really started. I mean, it's been going on for a long time. People have spoken about politics forever, but it really took a new turn when Donald Trump was announced that he was running for president and he was elected. Because then the political discourse in this country, the political rhetoric in this country, it got really heated. And it wasn't just for the talking heads on TV on Saturday or Sunday. No, it was everyday Americans who were paying ever so closer attention to what's going on around us. And as we see what's going on around us, we are becoming even more opinionated, especially people on the left. Because they have certainly been on the attack when it comes to people like Donald Trump, his supporters, secondarily Ron DeSantis, and so forth. And so I think the people on the right, we're becoming, and I can say that as somebody who's conservative, and so we're becoming more aggressive on our side as well, because we're tired of being on the defense. I mean, I've been filling in for, Red Eye for several years now, and I have probably, given you the monologue about how, and made the statement that I'm so incredibly frustrated with the Republican Party because they spend so much time on defense because for years they didn't want to be called the R word. They didn't want to be called racist. There was a time in my career where I was scared to death to talk about what was going on in Memphis here in Tennessee, because a lot of the issues that they have in Memphis, they're cultural in nature. You talk about fatherless households, and you talk about fatherless households in the black community, and you look at the impact that has on crime, the impact that has generationally, and how that fosters more and more crime, more and more of these kids that are absolutely out of control because they have no father to teach them about respect for authority and respect for laws. And there was a time in this country, I believe that time has passed now, but there was a time in this country where as a white person, you weren't allowed to talk about that. Well, I believe those times have passed because good people have to stand up for the communities that really need help. And so when somebody like me will, go down the road of, fatherless households and their impact on society, their impact on crime and their impact on schooling and so forth, I feel like I'm standing up for, I'm not criticizing that community. I'm standing up for it. I'm standing up for those kids who don't have a father because I want those kids to have some guidance. I want betterment for those communities. I want those communities to be better. And so whether you're talking about the millennials and Gen Z leaving San Francisco, people fleeing Chicago, people fleeing Memphis and some of these other areas, I guess part of the question is, are these areas, do you think that they're actually going to be able to recover? Because you know what happens when you got millennials and Gen Z, you know what happens when they leave, right? That means you've only got the filth and the squalor left. A lot of those people aren't working. A lot of those people aren't paying taxes. A lot of those people are just stealing and doing whatever godforsaken things that they do in those areas. And so I don't know what you do to fix the problems that the left has created in these cities. whether it is Memphis or San Francisco or Chicago. I mean, I don't know. I don't know under our current system, under our current political system, the only thing these communities can do is vote differently and vote Republican, but they won't do it. And because they won't do it, they'll never change. Those communities will never change. They can stand up and scream at the very same politicians that they voted for, but at the end of the day, they're just going to vote for the next Democrat. And therefore, these communities have fallen. And I don't know if they'll ever make it back. And you do pray for the good people of San Francisco. You do pray for the good people of Chicago. You do pray for the good people of Memphis. And there's a lot of good people in Nashville and a lot of these other cities. But there's a lot of good people that simply cannot afford to flee. And those are the people that I feel sorry for, because they are falling victim to the defund the police movement. They're falling victim to the Black Lives Matter movement. And I'm not talking about the sentiment. I'm talking about the political organization. Those are the people that I really feel sorry for. And so when someone like me castigates and talks about all of the things that are going on in these communities, it's not, I know it can seem as like a constant barrage of criticism from people like me and others, but it's out of love and compassion and not out of hatred. 866-90-RED-EYE, 866-907-3339.
Lines open for your calls. 866-90-RED-EYE on Red Eye Radio.
#866-90-RED has a phone number, 866-907-3339. Dan, in for Gary and Eric, this is Red Eye Radio.
This is Red Eye Radio on Westwood One. Now, it's Red Eye Radio. Talk about everything from politics to social issues and news of the day. Whether you're up late or you're just starting your day, welcome to the show. From the Uniden America Studios, for Gary McNamara and Eric Harley, Dan Mandis, this is Red Eye Radio.
And the phone number is 866-90-RED-EYE, 866-907-3339. This is a pretty big deal. You know, I mentioned this earlier in the broadcast. This is at the top of the Daily Mail. Now, the Daily Mail, people will say, oh, that's just, one of these gossip websites. It's really not. It's a legit news organization, the Daily Mail. And at the top of the fold for the Daily Mail is a story that I brought you earlier. Joe Biden is slammed for having a lack of respect after walking out of a Medal of Honor ceremony early and leaving a Vietnam War hero awkwardly listening to the closing benediction on his own. So basically what happened is he's got this, very old Medal of Honor. He's a Vietnam War hero, and he's getting this award. But before the thing is even over, Joe Biden just leaves. He starts wandering and he leaves. And so, for me, I just thought, well, it's another occasion of our elderly president wandering. But this is turning into, it would seem to me anyway, a pretty big deal. Joe Biden has sparked backlash after he hastily exited a Medal of Honor ceremony at the White House, leaving a celebrated war hero awkwardly alone on stage. The 80-year-old Biden quickly made his way out of the East Room after awarding the nation's highest military honor to a guy by the name of Larry Taylor, 81 years old, a retired Army captain celebrated for his heroics during the Vietnam War. But while Taylor shed a tear as the medal was pinned to his lapel, Joe Biden appeared less moved by the moment as he was reportedly already heading out the door before the closing benediction was actually read. And so you look at this video, and it is kind of heartbreaking, actually, because he pins the medal, and then he leaves. And nobody really knows what to do because our wandering president, everybody knows, I guess, that he's supposed to stay through the benediction. But he doesn't. He exits the stage and he leaves. And as he's leaving, heads are sort of following him out the door, and people are like, where's he going? And I just wonder, do they not tell the president what he's supposed to be doing or where he's supposed to be going? What is his cue? Because there's part of the story that's out there today where you have the book, and we covered this extensively yesterday, where you have this book where they're talking about how Biden gets frustrated because he feels like he is treated like a baby. At least that is according to the book. Well, I think this is part of the reason why, because they can't really trust the president to do the things that he is supposed to do. There's some audio. I want to play it for you, and I think it's actually kind of funny. And it's funny because it's Morning Joe. Now, if you don't know anything about Morning Joe, well, congratulations. I know enough to not like them. And so it's Joe Scarborough, it's Mika Brzezinski, his wife, and Joe Biden can do no wrong in their minds, it would appear. And so this book really has shown a light, according to multiple sources, on the fact that the Biden staff, the Biden administration, is having trouble dealing with his age. And that, coupled with the poll from the Wall Street Journal that shows that there's millions of Americans, I think it was 77%, I think it was 77%, that show that they feel like Joe Biden is too old for the White House. And so then when you see stories of Biden just leaving these ceremonies at the wrong time, clearly, people start wondering and doubting the president, which, by the way, makes all the sense in the world. And so this is Morning Joe. This was, I think it was either, it'd be yesterday morning when they were talking about this new poll that shows, Wall Street Journal, that shows that even the vast majority of Democrats believe the president's too old.
And a lot of Democrats are saying it's because he's too old. That's what's underlying this entire poll is Joe Biden's numbers are low because right now Americans think he's too old to do the job.
Now, here's the thing. He was talking about the overall numbers of the Wall Street Journal, which did show a couple of things. Number one, Donald Trump, Joe Biden effectively tied in a general election. Now, these general elections are won and lost in the states. Everybody knows that. So, take it for what it's worth. But when you look at the battleground states, Donald Trump is doing really well. But the president is underwater in so many different things. He's underwater on the economy. He's underwater on the border. He's underwater on COVID response. He's underwater when it comes to his interactions with China. And so for, Joe and Mika, they're trying to say that the reason why the president is getting such low marks is because of his age. Now, let me ask you a question. When you go into the grocery store or you go to the gas station and you're paying more money, and let's also not forget about interest rates that are sky high. Let's also not forget about, what's going on for a lot of people who lost money in their 401ks. They had to pull money out of their 401k to pay their bills back when inflation was 9.1%. So when all of that is going on, are you thinking that you disapprove of the president because he's old? No. You disapprove of the president because of what you're paying for a gallon of gas or a loaf of bread. But see, Morning Joe thinks it's about his age. You know what this is becoming akin to? This is becoming akin to if you criticize Kamala Harris, it's because you're a racist. Now, if you're criticizing Joe Biden, it's because you are an ageist, at least according to Morning Joe.
But I think you're right that there is the age factor is playing into this, and I know how frustrated the White House is on both of those counts. But the age factor, Joe Biden can try and joke about it, but it's still a looming factor.
I mean, the White House doesn't want to talk about age, I understand, but it colors everything. It colors everything. If you look at what he's done in foreign policy, you look at how the economy's going right now, these are numbers that should be giving any president a huge lift, and it's just not happening here.
Well, listen, the point is that the economy, they still keep trying to say that Bidenomics is working. I don't believe that it is, but I've always said this about economics in the economy. I've always said that you can take any economy and you can find a little nugget of positive in that economy. And I think that's perhaps part of what they're trying to do. But at least to me, by and large, it is clear that people are still suffering under Bidenomics. You can't deny that. You can't deny that even though it's down, for inflation is down from where it was, that we are still paying more money for everything. I mean, the other day we went over, how much more people are paying in school supplies and school clothes. And so the more that they try to spin this, quite frankly, the worse that they look. And now you've got Joe Scarborough and others out there saying, well, it's not that, his policies are bad. It's because you're just ageist. And I think that is for the Democrats, that is going to start getting old really, really quick. Because, I think the vast majority of the American people will say, really? Is that all you got? I'm complaining because my grocery bills are, $200 more every single trip to the grocery store, or, $300, $400, $500 more per month. And you're telling me that because I'm complaining about this and I'm frustrated about this, it's not because I'm frustrated with the cost of a gallon of gas. It's because I'm criticizing the president because of his age. I don't think that's going to fly with the American people. I don't even think that's going to fly with the Democrats. 866-90-RED-EYE is the phone number, 866-907-3339. Dan Mandis here. This is Red Eye Radio.
Get in touch with Red Eye Radio, toll free at 866-90-RED-EYE.
Red Eye Radio, 866-90-RED-EYE, 866-907-3339. Of course, a lot of people talking about this new book portraying Joe Biden as, being treated like a baby in the White House. The book is called The Last Politician: Inside Joe Biden's White House and the Struggle for America's Future. The Atlantic's Franklin Foer wrote the book, and he says that Biden felt like he was being babied after he quipped that Vladimir Putin cannot remain in power while addressing a crowd in Warsaw, Poland, back in March of 2022. So this came up during the White House press briefing yesterday with Corinne Jean-Pierre and Peter Doocy.
President Biden is the oldest president in U.S. history. Why does White House staff treat him like a baby?
No one treats the President of the United States, the Commander-in-Chief, like a baby.
So there's this book that says,
that's ridiculous.
When staff walked back
claim.
What sounded like a call for regime change in Russia, the president, quote, rather than owning his failure, he fumed to friends about how he was treated like a toddler. Was John Kennedy ever babied like that?
So look, I'll say this. There's going to be a range, always a range of books that are about every administration, as you know, that's going to have a variety of claims. That is not unusual. That happens all the time, and we're not going to litigate those here. That's something that we're not going to speak to. There is one thing that I do want to, because I think I was asked this question last week by one of your colleagues about this particular excerpt that they were referring to, and so I'll say this, we did see the excerpt, the context of the excerpt, and it seemed to be making the opposite overall point about how the value of his experience and wisdom resulted in rallying the free world against authoritarianism, which is important. We have seen this, you all have seen this, and passage of the most historic agenda in recent history in his handling of foreign policy, like rallying the world around Ukraine, as you just heard from our national security advisor, who laid out in really good questions that your colleagues asked about how the president is moving forward, about Ukraine, about kind of leading into these conversations that he's going to be having at the G20.
So they keep going down this road of, wisdom. And I guess it's the only place they can go. And this comment from Biden the other day is, I think he was in front of a bunch of union workers, but he was talking about his age and it seems like specifically this book.
I tell you what, someone said, that Biden, he's getting old, man. I tell you what.
Not someone, literally everyone is saying that you're too old, Joe.
Well, guess what? The only thing that comes with age is a little bit of wisdom. I've been doing this longer than anybody, and guess what? I'm going to continue to do it with your help.
Is it just me, or is he channeling like Bill Clinton? Like if you listen to that, he sounds like Bill Clinton.
Well, guess what?
Guess what? I did not have sex with that.
Well, guess what?
Now, by the way, here's a funny thing. So I've got like a 9-year-old stepson. And when he was younger, just going back to Joe Biden being treated like a baby, do you know what he does all the time? At least he used to before he matured a little bit. He used to always say, guess what? Guess what?
Well, guess what?
That's what my I think he was probably 6 when he was obsessed with saying,
well, guess what?
Guess what?
All
right, so that is Joe Biden. I got to tell you that watching the left and the media, although the media is beginning to spin out of their Biden protection mode that they've been in for so long. And so they're finally now starting to just dip their toe into accurately covering the president. But, you heard Corinne Jean-Pierre, and she's talking about how the president, he's not treated like a baby. That is a ridiculous assertion to make. And, she's talking about how the president has wisdom and all these other things. And again, you just heard President Biden in that audio bite from earlier also talking about wisdom. And I think just because you're old doesn't mean that you have wisdom. DailyMail.com asking Corinne Jean-Pierre about the Biden administration and the fact that they say, anyway, that they don't like to cover things or do things, have events and so forth before 10 a.m. because the president gets tired. But she's always talking about, all of this, all of these record-breaking policies and legislation that Joe Biden has put forward. I don't know where she gets that from. I mean, I really don't, because, say what you will, but the deficit is still skyrocketing. He has spent a lot of money. He can make a claim that he has created jobs and manufacturing jobs, when in reality, by the way, like all presidents, he's not being truthful about the amount of jobs that he has, quote unquote, created. And when he's talking about how, inflation is going down, he'll say that it's because of the Inflation Reduction Act. No. Corinne Jean-Pierre will say the same thing. He cut inflation. No, he didn't cut inflation. The reason why inflation went down is because a lot of that money that was infused into our economy from all those Biden stimulus package and the Trump stimulus packages as well, well, that money finally, dissolved. And so now Americans have less money. And so now you're going to see inflation starting to, of course, go back down. But when she keeps talking about all of the great, the great job that Joe Biden is doing, and I played you the audio of Joe Scarborough saying that the reason why Joe Biden is so unpopular these days is because he's old. That is not true. As I said, it is because of, number one, the policies, and number two, it's because every other day, Wandering Joe strikes again. And today, and you're probably going to see, if you watch, the news, various news channels, here in the next 24 hours, you're going to see this story of Wandering Joe walking out on the 81-year-old heroic Vietnam veteran who was getting that Medal of Honor, and Joe just left him stranded all alone on the stage as he just walks out the door. And the other thing that I would say to Joe Scarborough, the other thing that I would say to Karine Jean-Pierre is Joe keeps telling it's like maddening now where people are beginning to lose their ever-loving minds when Joe continues to tell the same tired Joe stories over and over again, specifically the stories that have been refuted and debunked time and time again. Specifically the story about how his kitchen caught on fire, where, he says the firefighters saved Joe. We lost a big portion of the firefighters saved Jill, and it took out, a big part of our home, and we almost lost a couple of firefighters that day. None of that ever happened. None of that ever happened. And so the American people, we're paying attention to this stuff. We're paying attention to not only the economy, but we're also paying attention to what the president says and what the president does. And it has nothing to do with his age. It has everything to do with his policy and his behavior, which is bizarre and strange to say the least. 866-90-RED-EYE is the phone number. 866-907-3339. 866-90-RED-EYE is the phone number, 866-907-3339. Dan Mandis in for Gary and Eric. One of my local listeners had reminded me, because I host a morning show here in Nashville, Tennessee on Super Talk, 99.7 WTN. I'm the morning show host. And one of my listeners, I was talking earlier in the program, as I fill in for Gary and Eric. By the way, they return Sunday night, Monday morning. And I was talking about the challenges of a lot of these bigger cities, and I specifically mentioned Memphis. And I was specifically talking about, the issues that Memphis is having with, fatherless households and the problems with, criminals and youth and just all of the cultural problems that cities like Memphis have. And so this is not necessarily unique to Memphis. However, as a Tennessee-based talk show host, I was reminded of a conversation that I had covered. This was a couple of weeks ago, where here in the state of Tennessee, we've been debating, any number of things. We had a whole special session related to, gun rights and keeping kids safe and all of that. But one of the things in the manifesto that, of course, that conversation out of the Covenant School shooting, and there's a manifesto that the shooter wrote that I believe because of woke reasons will never see the light of day because the shooter was, transgender and all these other things. But the point is that during that special session, there was one lawmaker who stood up. And I loved what Representative Joe Towns Jr. had to say. Now, he is black. He is out of Memphis. And so this guy has a front seat to all of the problems that Memphis has. And he has been trying to fix those problems. And as all of this is going on, as they talk about legislation, he says, maybe what we need to talk about instead of all of this legislation, maybe what we need to talk about is parenting.
Many of these problems are not problems that you're going to remedy with gun control, pen or paper or pad. In our country, Mr. Chairman, things have changed to a point where there's such a moral decay in our society. And many of the problems are when you were a child, parents did not tolerate the stuff they tolerate today. We were raised totally different. The raising of children in America has gone to pots.
Man, is he right. I would wonder, when you think back on how your parents raised you, is it different from the way that you're raising your kids? Now, I'm 55, and my adult children are now adults. So I can honestly say that, no, I raised my kids, generally speaking, the way that, my parents raised me. But if you've got like a 3, a 4, a 5, a 6-year-old, are you raising those kids the way that your parents raised you? Now, let's face it, the challenges that our parents faced are far different from the challenges that you're facing. Because you, as a parent, you're dealing with things like social media. You're dealing with things like, the woke agendas in schools, politicized woke school boards, all of those things. And so Joe Towns Jr., this representative out of Memphis, he understands all of that. He understands that, we can't legislate ourselves out of a sociological and a cultural issue. And even though we're talking about, Joe Towns Jr., a black man who is a representative out of Memphis, this isn't necessarily simply a black problem. It is a cultural issue that we have within society today where kids are they're aimless and they're rudderless and they have no real direction. And yes, a good part of that is because we have, for the most part, a lot of parents have sort of abdicated the rearing of their children to social media and to their phones and to this whole online world that parents don't even really know what is going on within those online worlds. And so this Democrat out of Memphis serving an area where he has seen juvenile crime go up exponentially in recent years, in his city continues to devolve into chaos and crime. He says this is the type of discussion that we should be having. It's not about guns. It's not about manifestos. It's about parenting.
There are many men in this room that are older than you, and they understand the standards that their parents had. I didn't say the police. I didn't say the principal. I didn't say the church. I said what their parents would allow them to do. One of the big mistakes we made years ago is we took discipline totally out of the equation with any child as it relates to schools, which bled over into the homes. An undisciplined young person, like an undisciplined man or woman, will be eventually a dangerous person.
I mean, he's right. Because he has seen it time and time again. Back in September in Memphis, we had that mass shooting where a 19-year-old streamed his crime, and it was absolutely sick, and he killed a handful of people. That deranged behavior, again, that guy was 19 years old. That deranged behavior does not start when he turns 18. No. It started when he was a kid. And his story, like so many others, you look at the backgrounds of all of these criminals out there, and the vast majority of those kids had no father in the home. Family and parenting is absolutely critical. And Joe Towns, for one, he gets it.
There's nowhere in the world you could be a kid in my mother's house at 15 years old, at 21 years old, and have a doggone gun and she doesn't know about it, or the daddy didn't know about it. They would beat the bark off your butt. And they meant it. And then I'm going to tell you twice. Okay, they meant what they say. So while we're looking at these, we're looking in one narrow vein in order to try to solve a problem that's become a part of our DNA at this country, to solve a problem that's not going to be. We got to have all these pistons firing, and all of them are critical. Law enforcement is critical. Churches are critical. Schools are critical. Parents are critical, even more critical.
I mean, look, I hate to bring up, it takes a village, but that's kind of what Towns is saying. And so one of the things that he brought up, and by the way, when he's talking about the schools, he's talking about the church, he's talking about parenting, and a little bit he's going to talk about the neighborhood. And while I do understand that everyone who is conservative will bristle at the notion that it takes a village, it takes a parent to get that kid into church. It takes a parent to instill in that child that they need to respect authority and take school seriously and to respect your neighbors. Now, coming up next, Joe Towns Jr., this lawmaker out of Memphis, who is saying on the in the state legislature here in the state of Tennessee that we cannot legislate ourselves out of societal and cultural problems. He's going to bring up the topic of tough love. And this is commentary that you don't want to miss. 866-90-RED-EYE is the phone number. 866-907-3339. We'll return next on Red Eye Radio.
Lines open for your calls. 866-90-RED-EYE on Red Eye Radio.
It's Red Eye Radio, 866-90-RED-EYE, 866-907-3339. Dan Mandis here in for Gary and Eric. Playing you some audio of a lot of people reacting to it. Representative Joe Towns Jr., he is a state lawmaker here in the state of Tennessee. I am a Tennessee-based talk show host out of Nashville, Tennessee. And he was on the floor of the State House, and he was talking about how, here in Tennessee, we had this rather epic special session, and it was all about, among other things, protecting our kids and, how to prevent school shootings. And it was to me, it was a complete waste of time by and large. But Joe Towns getting up and really talking about how we have societal problems here in America. We have cultural problems here in America. We have a parenting problem here in America. And so one thing that, if you were listening previously, you know that he sort of dipped his toe into, it takes the neighborhood, it takes the church, it takes the school, it takes parenting. Kind of dipped his toe. And he is, by the way, a Democrat. And so he sort of dipped his toe into it takes a village. And he also brought up tough love, the whole saying of this is going to hurt me more than it hurts you. So Towns brought up that these days parents are simply afraid to discipline their kids and spanking. Remember when we had all those debates over that football player, Adrian Peterson? Remember that, using a switch on his kid to get him to behave, and how insane that was? Well, Towns was talking about spanking kids and using spanking as a way to keep their kids' heads on straight. Listen. Here's part of what he had to say. Again, this is Joseph Towns Jr.
Wisdom, some knuckleheads decided to make it almost impossible for you to spank your child, okay? See, in the black community, we whoop your butt. In the white community, it wasn't so much. We knew what we had coming. But when the law changed, it took a lot of the way. Well, I can't do nothing to him because he can call the police on me. Well, let me give you some good news. My daddy told me, he said, son, I'll whoop your ass in front of the police, pardon me, and then you got to go with them, okay?
There you go. That Joseph Towns Jr. Oh, and there's more. And listen, there's nothing that he is saying that is not absolutely spot on. And so one thing that he brings up, and it makes sense, of course, is that it used to be we would all stick together as a neighborhood. Parents looked out for each other, and now it's just litigious and spiteful, and everybody argues all the time. And I remember a day, and I bet you do too, where my dad, in no uncertain terms, let me know what I was doing wrong. And so even if it came from a neighbor, which sadly happened often when I was a kid, and I can still see that look on his face when he would get angry and he would be disappointed in the way that I would acted, even if I was, sort of smarting off to a neighbor. My dad, he wouldn't tolerate it.
And we didn't have no internet and all this stuff, and they knew, your mama and daddy knew it before you got back home. And you thought your mama and daddy was spying on you, following. How your mama, how she went down there? But grown folk were all together against the bad behavior of children, okay? Well, Miss Johnson said, you did this, that, and other. He said, Mama, I didn't do that. First thing you might get a slap. You calling her a lie. You calling Miss Johnson a lie? Well, you said you didn't do it. She said you did do it. Why is she lying on you? You calling her a lie? They had us under control, okay? And so all we're doing, we have to look at some other things to get children back. Police can't do it after the fact. The legislature can't do it after the fact. We need everybody trying to get this problem under control.
Well, look, he's right. That is Joseph Towns Jr. He is a lawmaker out of Memphis, and he's black. And he is, again, not to belabor the point, but he is out of Memphis, and he has seen Memphis spiral into crime and drugs, fatherless households, teenagers having, kids out of wedlock. The schools are terrible, and he's tired of it. And so that's when we talk about, what is going on in these Democrat-run cities. It's emblematic of what's happening with, some of these cultures where there are so many fatherless households. And you could fix a lot of these problems. I'm just telling you, friends, you could fix a lot of these problems in these various cities if we just had fathers in the household, if we just were able to rear these kids and teach these kids to respect law and order and to respect authority. Representative Joe Towns Jr., on this particular thing, a Democrat, he is absolutely spot on.
This is Red Eye Radio on Westwood One. Now, it's Red Eye Radio. Talk about everything from politics to social issues and news of the day. Whether you're up late or you're just starting your day, welcome to the show. From the Uniden America Studios. For Gary McNamara and Eric Harley, Dan Mandis. This is Red Eye Radio.
Appreciate you listening. 866-90 Red Eye is the phone number. 866-907-3339. There is a lot going on out there. They're trying to 14th Amendment the president in relation to January 6th. We're going to talk about that. There is so much going on as far as January 6th and what is going on with these various defendants, these Proud Boys. This is in the news today, where another Proud Boy has been sentenced to a really, really long prison sentence. And Eric Bolling on Newsmax was talking about this and covering this. And, when you listen to these sentences of these Proud Boys, and they're basically accusing them of, being partly the instigators, along with Donald Trump, of course, but they're accusing these Proud Boys of being the instigators of what happened on January 6th. But they're charging these guys, and I don't know how you describe January 6th. Do you describe January 6th as an insurrection? Or do you call it vandalism? Do you call it, trespassing or a riot that got out of control? That's kind of what I call it a protest that got out of control. That's how I refer to it. Other people may call it a riot. I would refer to it as a protest that did, go out of control. But I also don't believe that these Proud Boys, these, instigators of January 6th, which I don't know if they did or not, but do they really deserve 13, 15, 17, 20 years for their role in January 6th, which is, again, a protest that, got out of control a little bit? I don't think so. And Eric Bolling was talking about these sentences.
A district judge, Timothy Kelly, gave several Proud Boy members extensive sentences for essentially trespassing in the Capitol. A man named Joe Biggs will serve 17 years behind bars for being in the Capitol for 20 minutes where he peacefully protested. He has a 6-year-old daughter and a mother with cancer.
Jeez.
Also, there's a former United States Marine, Zachary Rell. He'll receive 15 years for nonviolent crimes on January 6th. And a one-time leader in the Proud Boys, Ethan Nordin, was in the Capitol walking past the Capitol Police and is now branded a domestic terrorist and sentenced to 18 years in prison.
Yeah, and these guys, they're in front of the judge. They're begging for their freedom. They're essentially begging for their lives. And the judge clearly just doesn't care. And so for these three men, and by the way, there's a lot of other January 6ers out there that are still, rotting in prison. I understand why Donald Trump and others would say, we need to look at these and we need to, perhaps consider pardoning these folks. Because you can look at these, three Proud Boys, and again, you got these really long sentences. And you think, man, compare those to some of these other guys that commit crimes, and they don't get nearly the sentences that these guys do. Now the point that I have always made regarding January 6th is that the Democrats and the politicians in Washington, D.C., clearly they care more about their house, the Capitol, than your house. Reason being, and they care more about their neighborhood than your neighborhood. And the reason being is because it clearly shows that they are far more passionate about, protecting their own than protecting you and your own. And by the way, a lot of these Democrats want to take away your Second Amendment right to bear arms. And so on the one hand, they're allowing all of these criminals in all of these different states with these, George Soros prosecutors to, run rampant. Yet they'll give these guys, 15, 17, 20-year sentences. Are you flipping kidding me? It seems extreme. And I'm not even going to say it seems a little extreme. It seems a lot extreme.
Back in January, a criminal named Gerald Harris shot a father in broad daylight 11 times as the father was walking with his 2 children to school in Washington, D.C. That gunman got a plea deal to voluntary manslaughter and a 13-year sentence from a D.C. judge. Our Justice Department now saying these 3 Proud Boys deserve more than double the time behind bars than a man who committed murder walking his kids to school. This clearly shows 2 sets of justice in America.
Yeah, and clearly he's right. Eric Bolling is right. And you can't deny, and I'm not going to, go through this, segment yet again. You can't deny that here in America, we do have, number one, 2 tiers of justice. That's number one. But number 2, you can't deny the crime that is happening across America. Look at what's coming across our southern border. With all of the issues with, drugs, we have, possible terrorists coming across our southern border. We've got, the drug cartels bringing drugs in as well. And even when we catch those guys, they don't get 20-year prison sentences. So why do the Proud Boys get these really long and, I would say extreme sentences for simply a protest that went awry? And listen, I'm not saying that what they did was right. I'm not saying that what they did was, something that they shouldn't be punished for. They should be punished. But really? For that long? And especially, I don't know, I don't believe that these guys would be a threat to society. I think they've probably learned their lesson. And sometimes, you know what? Stuff happens. And yeah, January 6th did happen. And it was not a good moment in America. I think part of what this is, though, you look at what happened on January 6th, and you look at what happened with, Nancy Pelosi and a lot of the folks there that did not, as far as the intelligence goes, they didn't tell the Capitol Police what was going on, the threats on January 6th, the fact that they were looking for more security, and Donald Trump asked for more security. He approved more security, and there was not more security provided. More security was not provided. And so I think that there's plenty of blame to go around. But for me, when I saw how long these prison sentences are, it is crazy. And so you look at what's happening with these guys. Then you look at what's happening with Donald Trump in some of these various states regarding the 14th Amendment. Now, if you don't know what's going on, you've got the Trump, and he is, of course, as you know, he's being indicted in 4 different cases. I think there's 91 total indictments, and it's really ugly. But one of the things that they're trying to do is remove Donald Trump from some of these various states based on the 14th Amendment. And so we're going to get into that coming up next. Your phone calls also welcome at 866-90-RED-EYE. 866-90-RED-EYE, 866-907-3339. Dan Mandis here in for Gary and Eric. This is Red Eye Radio.
Hi, I'm Jen Loomis, a transport safety expert at J.J. Keller, and I'm here to share a tip on speed and space management. Due to safety concerns, many motor carriers have policies that limit or prohibit the use of cruise control. If your motor carrier does allow you to use cruise control, you should only use it in good driving conditions during daylight hours and on roads that have light traffic, few curves or hills, and a consistent speed limit. Never use cruise control when operating in adverse driving conditions, including wet, icy, or slippery roads, during rush hour in heavy traffic or on congested highways, at night, or when you're tired or fatigued. During all of these driving scenarios, you want to be controlling and adjusting your speed as you drive instead of having to suddenly brake if you encounter an obstacle. In the case of a slippery road surface, you want to be able to slow your vehicle by not accelerating instead of using the brakes whenever possible. This tip was brought to you by J.J. Keller and Associates. Visit us at jjkeller.com.
Get in touch with Red Eye Radio, toll free at 866-90-RED-EYE.
Red Eye Radio, 866-90-RED-EYE, the phone number, 866-907-3339. Talking about these sentences, these really long sentences for these Proud Boys, January 6ers. You've got Zachary Rehl, Joe Biggs, and an Oath Keeper founder, Stuart Rhodes. And, I mean, you're talking about really long prison sentences, 15, 17, 18 years for, as they say, nonviolent crimes. And I think for me, this it's just another piece of obvious evidence that shows that in this country, it seems to me like we are protecting the violent criminals and we're going after these guys, which, simply, at least to me, it seems like they were, yes, it was not good. I'm not excusing their behavior. It was a protest gone awry. It was a protest that turned violent. Kind of saw that during the Black Lives Matter riots too, didn't you? How many of those folks were prosecuted? In other words, all these guys did ultimately, and I understand that they're going to say that what they were doing, they were, part of the organizers of the insurrection. But at the same time, I just believe that these are sentences that are far, far too long. And a lot of people saying this is indicative of this 2 tiers of justice. Let's see what you think. Brenda is in Portland. The phone number is 866-90-RED-EYE. Brenda's in Portland on Red Eye Radio. Hey, Brenda.
Hey. Yes,
hey. Yeah, go ahead.
I live out here in Portland. I don't know how many followed the Black Lives Matter out here, but it was ridiculous. It destroyed our entire city, shut down many businesses, forced the courthouses to erect fences, and they sustained lots of damage, including arson, held our police out here in Seattle hostage by blocking doorways and things, yet there was not a single person prosecuted. And that was a good case of protest.
And Brenda, you're right, and I appreciate the call. You're right. I mean, you look at, oh gosh, I wish I could pull it up real quick. Maybe I'll have an opportunity. But you look at in all of these, because Brenda's spot on. You look at all of the damage done by the George Floyd Summer of Love protests, right? I mean, you are talking about billions and billions of dollars of damage. Not even close to what the Capitol building in Washington, D.C. suffered. Yet, again, very few people were prosecuted for that vandalism. As a matter of fact, didn't local police, I think it was local lawmakers actually, that said, wow, yeah, you've got to just let them riot it out. You know, just let them get it out of their system. Remember that whole thing? That was insanity. And again, Brenda's right. Very few of those folks actually faced any kind of justice. Enzo is calling from Green, New York on Red Eye Radio. Hey, Enzo, how are you?
Hey, good morning. I'm doing great. How about yourself? Hey, great
Doing
topic. I love your show. This is a travesty to the Constitution of America. This wasn't an insurrection. It was 100% what you had said. It was a protest that went awry. Period. Amen. And again, Brenda was also correct. What happened to the Black Lives Matter? What happened to that young lady that was killed in D.C. during this riot? Did that officer get any time for it? We don't know, do we? And what happened to all those people that burned down the cities, ruined the businesses of lives, of people's lives, people that had gotten hurt? This is totally unjustified.
And
totally
Enzo, I appreciate the call. Thank you very much. And yeah, one of the things, as you look at everything that happened on January 6th, then I don't know any other way to explain it other than it was a protest gone awry. And by the way, certainly Donald Trump, I don't believe that Trump is in any way responsible for it's not an insurrection, whatever it is you want to call it. Donald Trump was not responsible, no matter how much they will try to pin this on Trump. And they may actually get him, on something. It wouldn't surprise me, just like they may get him in with Fannie Willis out there in Fulton County. They may get Donald Trump on some sort of a charge or some sort of charges. Because my question to you would be this. Do you really think that in a district where Joe Biden won by 77% and where in this district, in Fulton County, she literally ran on getting Donald Trump convicted for trying to overturn the election or whatever it is however she framed it. You have a district attorney that ran on that platform. Do you really think that Donald Trump is going to be able to get a fair trial there in Fulton County in Georgia? No, he's not going to be able to get a fair trial there. Anybody who knows anything about what is going on in Atlanta, in Fulton County, and Fannie Willis knows that this is a politicized process. And now here we are with these January 6th defendants getting 15, 17, and 18 years in jail for these nonviolent crimes. It is really sad. And I agree with some of you folks who are hitting me up on social media at Dan Mandis Show. Yeah, you know what? You could very easily make the argument that, yes, this is an attack on freedom. I will just say that the thing that is painfully obvious is that for the Republicans, this attack on our side of the aisle, politically and legally, is not going to go away. I was talking to somebody the other day, and, it was all about Donald Trump. But then let's say you get rid of Donald Trump, then they're going to investigate, Ron DeSantis. Let's say DeSantis is the nominee for the Republicans. They'll go after him. They'll go after him for, shipping these migrants to Washington, D.C. and in New York and some of these other places. I mean, you know that they've now figured out the code. They've cracked the code, the Democrats have. And so now, moving forward, they're going to find anything and everything they can to bring you up on some sort of a charge. And so for, our side of the aisle, they have done everything they can to try to lower the bar for impeachment. And look, if Donald Trump, and we talked about the polling yesterday, so I don't want to go back too far, but, if Trump actually did win the presidential election, and I believe that he could, there's a lot of people out there that are saying that, no, there's no way that Donald Trump can win the election. No way he can win a general election. I don't know that. Because there are a lot of people that said that Donald Trump couldn't win 2016 until he won 2016, right? But this insanity is going to continue. And obviously the left is pushing the 14th Amendment to get rid of Donald Trump. And this has been an ongoing conversation since January 6th happened. Now, remember what the 14th Amendment does. It's the 14th Amendment, Section 3. And I'm going to get into this coming up in the second half of this hour. But, basically what it does is it disqualifies or bans a person like Donald Trump from holding federal office if you have taken an oath as an officer of the United States. Says that you cannot hold office if you have engaged in a, quote, insurrection or rebellion against the same, or given aid or comfort to the enemies thereof. We'll talk about that straight ahead. 866-90 Red Eye is the phone number. 866-907-3339. Dan Mandis here in for Gary and Eric. This is Red Eye Radio.
Red Eye Radio from the Uniden America Studios. Now, for Gary McNamara and Eric Harley, here is Dan Mandis.
866-90 Red Eye is the phone number, 866-907-3339. That's where we find Jerry calling from Iowa on Red Eye Radio. Hey, Jerry, how are you?
I like your show when the guys are here and when you're here. So here in Iowa, I talked to Ron DeSantis the other day at a rural pizza joint, if that makes any sense. It happens here a lot. And so I asked him his thought. I'm a little nervous here. I asked him if he thought that the Democrats were planning more civil unrest, hoaxes, or, God forbid, a civil war. And so my comment is related to that. I don't think most Americans know how socialists seize power. Here's what it looks like. They let thieves steal under $1,000, but they accost, prosecute, and attack in social media people who don't wear masks. And so Americans who haven't traveled abroad or been to civil unrest or civil wars or read history don't know that the grand picture is for the top Democrat intelligentsia to really destabilize all institutions, and that includes law enforcement and civil peace. So I just wanted you to. So Ron DeSantis, his comment was really interesting.
I was going to ask, what was his comment?
Well, he told us in the room while we're eating pizza that in the 2020 that Minnesota burned and Portland burned and other states burned, but in Florida they he actually said, "Go ahead and make my day." He said that Florida was not allowed to burn, and if he were elected president, blah blah blah. The same thing for the rest of the U.S. But I don't think most Americans understand the goal, the aim of socialism. If you look at other countries that have fallen, is to destabilize all institutions, including parenting and with the transgender garbage. And it's just they want to burn it down and replace it with the tyrannical form. So I just wanted to hear your comments on that, and I appreciate you being there tonight. It's always a great show.
Thank you, Jerry. I appreciate it. And there's a number of different ways that the progressives, the socialists, whatever you want to say, are taking over America. And it is when they demonize good people, because good people stand up and raise up against their tyranny. Now, one of the things that they do is they like to take over the language. Jerry, you were talking about, destabilizing our institutions. They are destabilizing our schools. They're destabilizing our high schools. They're destabilizing our elementary schools by teaching all of this racist, garbage. All the transgender stuff is also permeating in our schools. That also impacts parents and conservative parents. And so there's a lot of destabilizing that is going on within these woke institutions, and it is coming at the expense of our children and of those institutions. And so you have absolute and utter chaos going on inside these schools, whether it's elementary schools, whether it is, colleges. Of course, we all know that colleges have been insane for a long time. And then they take over the language. They tell you that you can't say certain things. Otherwise, you are racist, you are misogynist, you are transphobic, you are homophobic. So when good people stand up and they're made to feel like, they're being the ones that are horrible and bad, and so they're told to sit down, it takes a very strong person to stand up and remain standing and say, no, you're the ones that are wrong. You're the ones that are racist. You're the ones that are anti-female. You're the ones that are anti-girl. That's what's going on. Gary and Eric, they talk all the time about the radical transgender movement, right? And I got to tell you that at its core, as the left will stand up and they'll say that, conservatives and parents and so forth, they are anti-trans and they're homophobic and all this kind of crap. It takes a very strong person to stand up and say, in the middle of all of that progressive fury, no, you're the ones that are wrong. You're the ones that are being sexist against women. You're trying to literally cancel women. How is it you don't see that? How is it you don't understand that? And so you're right. What does need to happen, and I believe that it is happening here in America, is there does need to be a giant awakening, a standing up where conservatives say, no, we're not going to take this. People call me as a conservative talk show host. You can put that in air quotes. A conservative talk show host. People call me racist all the time. It's not a day in the neighborhood if somebody's not calling me a racist. And I don't care, because I know it's in my heart. And most people who have the strength, who have found the strength to stand up to the woke insanity that is out there, they will tell you about the pressure. And how you do have to remain strong. You do have to remain vigilant and fight for your country and fight for your kids, fight for your family, fight for your flag, and fight for your freedoms. Because every day they're working to take them away. And that's what needs to happen. And so I like that Ron DeSantis, who is a guy that I like, and he, as you said, he said in Florida, basically, we said make our day. That's all fine, well, and good. One of the things, and I mentioned previous, where you talk about how, these socialists, these progressives, they're racist. I mean, I could very easily make that argument, because part of what, they do is they castigate those who they'll criticize those and tell those people to shut down, sit down and shut up when you're raising your hand and you're saying, but wait a minute. The people that were terribly affected by the Black Lives Matter riots, the George Floyd riots, the Summer of Love, they were black folks who lost their businesses, who lost their lives, who lost their homes, who lost their neighborhoods, who lost their stores. And if you're somebody who stands up and stands up for that community, only for the wokevists out there to come after you saying that you're racist, and it's like, why? Why am I racist? For trying to protect that community? That is the insanity of what is going on today. And I appreciate the call. Let's see here. This is James calling from Lebanon, Tennessee on Red Eye Radio. Hey, James.
Morning, Dan. My point is exactly what you were just preaching. We have McConnell, we have Lindsey Graham, we have McCarthy, and what the Democrats are masters in is how they play the Republicans. I am a Christian. I'm a devout Christian. But I will tell you this. They play the religious right like a yo-yo. Because I've had people I've talked to, and, every time you speak to them, what's the first thing? Well, we don't want to be mean. You don't need to be hurting people's feelings. That's all in good. But if you don't stand up for what is right, I'll tell you right now, if Donald Trump gets one vote, you can bet he comes from Lebanon, Tennessee. Donald Trump is a proven commodity. It's proven. He's a proven commodity. He's not a politician. Any politician. I don't care if he's on the right or the left. I don't want him in office leading this country ever again. I want somebody, I have kind of question marks on that, what's his name, Vivek
Ramaswamy.
I would rather him be a part of Trump's cabinet or under somebody else, whether it's Trump or not, and prove himself. Now they can say, well, that's racist. No, it's not. That's being cautious. This is America. There are people out there that want to destroy this country. And, people, just like you said, racist. Hey, I have mixed people in my family. I coach baseball up here in Mount Juliet, Tennessee. I have black and white kids, and I love each and every one of them exactly the same. No black owes me anything. But the fact is, I don't owe them anything. We are in America. We are Americans. That is America. So we've got to have somebody in the Senate, in the Congress. Before I leave, I want to ask you this one question, and then I'll hang up and listen to your remarks.
Okay.
Everybody dogged Matt Gaetz, Boebert, and Andy Biggs for locking up the Speaker of the House from McCarthy. Now, you just think for 5 seconds, if they hadn't have done that, just how it would be right now.
All right, James, I will answer that question for you. Coming up next, 866-90-RED-EYE is the phone number, 866-907-3339. We'll return next on Red Eye Radio.
Lines open for your calls. 866-90-RED-EYE on Red Eye Radio.
Red Eye Radio, 866-90 Red Eye, 866-907-3339. Dan Mandis here in for Gary and Eric. They will be back next Sunday night, Monday morning. And Ron is right now calling from Kansas City on Red Eye Radio. Hey, Ron, how are you?
I'm fine, thanks. Yes, I just wanted to ask you a question. If a regular person attempted murder, compare that to a person who's trying to kill the vice president of the United States or the Speaker of the House. They should get the same charge? Is that what you're saying?
Well, yeah, if somebody does something wrong, regardless of their political proclivities, we should all be convicted or tried under the same under the same rules and regulations. Yeah.
Well,
do you not agree?
Hinckley, didn't he try to kill the president of the United States? Isn't he still in jail? I mean, they represent more than the person. They represent our government. This is the most powerful country in the world, and they're trying to assassinate folk. They should just get regular charge. Somebody tried to kill Trump. What, he just get 6 months? I mean, it doesn't. I'm trying to figure out who tried to. I understand they were chanting "Hang Mike Pence." I understand that. And I'm not defending that, but as far as I know, nobody actually physically tried to find Mike Pence, took a gun or whatever, and haul him off to the gallows or shoot him. Nobody did that. So in other words, everybody knows who's watched that. If they would have found these guys, what would have happened? Everybody knows that.
But Ron, Ron, this is America. This is America, and you don't try and convict people on everybody knows what they would have done.
Hinckley is still in jail, and he tried to assassinate the president of the United States.
Yes, because he had a gun and he actually fired at the president.
It sounds ridiculous. Thanks.
All right. All right. Apparently that sounds ridiculous. All right. Very good. Thanks for the call. Let's see here. Let's see, what time is it? 866-90 Red Eye, 866-90. We got time for one more call. Very quickly. This is Robert in Oklahoma City on Red Eye Radio. Hey, Robert, how are you?
Hey, I'm doing pretty good. Hey, I've been listening to you about the Oath Keepers and the Proud Boys. I want to make a comparison about BLM and Antifa. Have you noticed how they haven't been protesting since the Democrats have been in office?
They have been awfully quiet, haven't they?
Yeah, and what it is, I'm going to make a kind of absurd comparison, right? The BLM and Antifa are like the brown shirts from the Nazi parties back in the 20s and 30s, right? They're useful idiots of the Democratic Party. When they need them, they just call them back out. And they completely destroyed the Oath Keepers and the Proud Boys like they have the Tea Parties. They don't like it because
Robert, I'm sorry your phone's cutting out, and I missed a good part of what you said, but I do appreciate the call. And the bottom line is, I'm not entirely certain where Robert was going. I missed a lot of it, but his point is well taken, and it is a good point and a familiar one at that. And that is, we all know what happened in the days following George Floyd's death, and we all know what happened, and we all know the communities that were impacted. So the question is, why is it we're getting such a harsh response to the January 6ers? But a lot of those folks, they did not face justice.
This is Red Eye Radio on Westwood.